In the gilded heart of New York City, where fortunes are made and shattered over a single handshake, a $500 million corporate merger was about to be sealed. At the table sat Damien Rochester, a titan of industry, a man whose face graced magazine covers. Opposite him, the venerable Mr. Kenji Tanaka, a Japanese investor betting his company's legacy on the deal. And serving them a waitress named Olivia Sterling, a woman rendered invisible by her uniform. But Olivia had a secret, a past she had run from, a skill she kept hidden. As the pen touched the paper, she heard a single phrase in Japanese, a quiet assurance from the billionaire to his partner. But her blood ran cold, because she knew the language perfectly. And that's not what he had said at all. The Gilded Compass wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater, perched on the 65th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. Its clientele consisted of the city's gods and kings, the financial titans, the political power brokers, the inheritors of dynastic wealth. And for the past 18 months, Olivia Sterling had been one of its silent stagehands. To the patrons, she was a pleasant, efficient, and utterly forgettable part of the scenery. They saw the crisp black uniform, the neat auburn ponytail, and the polite, distant smile. They didn't see the woman who just 3 years ago had been the top of her class at Columbia Business School, the star pupil in international relations with a near-native fluency in Japanese, groomed for a career in the diplomatic corps or a high-powered consultancy in Tokyo. They didn't see the life she'd abandoned to come home and care for her dying mother, the mountain of medical debt that had swallowed her inheritance, her savings, and finally her ambition, leaving her here, balancing trays of seared scallops and vintage Bordeaux. Tonight's main act was in the restaurant's most coveted private room, the Polaris Suite. The reservation was under the name Rochester. Damien Rochester. Even Olivia, who had deliberately unplugged from the world of high finance she once aspired to join, knew that name. He was the charismatic founder and CEO of Helios Future Energies, a green tech behemoth that had taken Wall Street by storm. His company promised to revolutionize renewable energy with revolutionary solar panel technology, and his public persona was that of a visionary, an environmental savior wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. His guest was a man of a different mold. Mr. Kenji Tanaka was in his late 70s, impeccably dressed with a quiet dignity that seemed to absorb the ambient noise of the city below. He was the chairman of Tanaka Heavy Industries, a multi-generational manufacturing firm from Osaka, known for its unwavering commitment to quality and honor. He was old world capital, and Damien Rochester was the seductive face of the new. Olivia's job was simple: be perfect. She poured the $2,000 a bottle. Screaming Eagle Cabernet, with a steady hand, announced each course with practiced quietness and ensured their water glasses were never less than half full. For the first 2 hours, the conversation was a mix of English pleasantries and business talk, translated by Rochester's slick Ivy League interpreter. They discussed synergies, supply chains, and market integration. It was the final step in a massive deal. Tanaka Industries was set to invest $500 million to become the exclusive manufacturer and distributor for Helios's new technology throughout Asia. As dessert plates were cleared, Rochester produced a thick, leather-bound portfolio. "The final agreement, Kenji," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Everything we discussed. Our teams have gone over it with a fine-tooth comb." Mr. Tanaka nodded, taking the document. He didn't read English fluently, relying on the translated summaries his own team had provided. He trusted the months of negotiation, the due diligence, the reputation of Damien Rochester. He pulled out a beautiful lacquered fountain pen. Rochester leaned in, placing a hand reassuringly on the older man's shoulder. It was a gesture of friendship, of partnership. He then switched to Japanese. His accent was clumsy, clearly rehearsed, the kind a tourist uses to order a beer. He said in what he thought was a simple phrase of trust, "Kokoro wo komete shourai no tame ni," with all my heart for the future. But Olivia, standing by the service door, felt a jolt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Because that's not what she heard. Rochester's pronunciation was atrocious, mangling the vowels, but the words he had attempted to say were clear to a fluent speaker. He hadn't said "with all my heart." He had said "subete no shisan wa watashi no mono ni naru." All of your assets will become mine. It was a small, devastating difference. A slip of the tongue. A horrific mistake, no. It was the cadence. The quiet, almost smug confidence in his voice. He was mocking him. Saying the quiet part out loud, confident that no one who mattered would ever understand. Mr. Tanaka, hearing only the familiar sounds of his language, smiled warmly and prepared to sign. The interpreter, paid by Rochester, simply beamed. The pen nib hovered over the signature line. Time seemed to slow. Olivia's training, her very instinct, screamed at her to remain invisible. Say nothing. This wasn't her world. This wasn't her fight. Getting involved would mean the end of her job, the only thing keeping her afloat. She could picture her tiny apartment, the stack of final notice bills on her counter. But then she pictured her mother, a woman who taught her that silence in the face of a lie was a lie in itself. She saw the trusting face of Mr. Tanaka, a man about to sign away his family's legacy on the back of a cruel hidden joke. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her throat went dry. She took one step forward from the shadows of the service station, then another. Her voice, when it came out, was not the deferential whisper of a waitress. It was clear, firm, and resonant with the authority she hadn't felt in years, and it was in flawless, formal Japanese. "Tanaka-sama, forgive my unforgivable interruption." Both Rochester and Tanaka froze, looking at her, as if she had just materialized from thin air. Rochester's charming smile faltered, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. She continued in Japanese, her gaze locked on the elderly investor. "I must advise you to stop. What he just said to you was not for the future. He said, all of your assets will become mine. And this document in front of you," she said, her voice dropping slightly but losing none of its intensity. "I overheard his lawyers discussing it on the phone in the lobby earlier. The English text in Section 7, subsection C, does not cede manufacturing rights. It transfers controlling interest in your parent company to a Helios subsidiary in the Cayman Islands upon the first payment." The silence in the room was absolute. Mr. Tanaka's hand, holding the pen, trembled and fell to his side. The ink had not touched the paper. Damien Rochester's face, a mask of geniality seconds before, had transformed. The confusion had vanished, replaced by a cold reptilian fury. He turned his head slowly, his blue eyes locking onto Olivia's. The mask was off. The predator was exposed. He spoke in English, his voice a low, dangerous growl that dripped with venom. "You have no idea what you've just done." The seconds after Olivia spoke stretched into an eternity. Mr. Tanaka stared at her, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. He looked from Olivia's earnest, steady gaze to Rochester's face, which was rapidly darkening with a rage he couldn't conceal. Rochester was the first to recover. He laughed a short, sharp bark devoid of humor. "My apologies, Kenji," he said, waving a dismissive hand at Olivia. "The staff here is overzealous." She clearly misheard. "My Japanese is clumsy, I admit." He turned to his interpreter, a man named Gavin, who was now sweating profusely. "Gavin, tell Mr. Tanaka she is mistaken." Gavin, pale as a ghost, began to stammer in Japanese, but Olivia cut him off, her voice like steel. "Ask him to translate Section 7, subsection C for you right now. Tanaka-sama." Word for word. Not from his memory, but from the paper. This was the checkmate. Mr. Tanaka, now deeply suspicious, gestured to the document. With trembling hands, the interpreter picked it up. His eyes scanned the dense legal text, and the last of the color drained from his face. He looked at Rochester, his expression pleading. Rochester's glare was murderous. The interpreter's silence was more damning than any confession. Mr. Tanaka slowly rose from his chair, his age seeming to fall away, replaced by the righteous anger of a betrayed patriarch. He gave Rochester a look of profound contempt, then turned to Olivia. He bowed deeply, a gesture of immense respect that was shockingly out of place in the corporate suite. "You have saved my family's honor," he whispered in Japanese. He then turned, and without another word walked out of the room, his own team scrambling to follow. The door clicked shut, leaving Olivia alone with Damien Rochester. The billionaire's facade of civilization crumbled completely. "You little nobody," he hissed, his voice low and shaking with fury. "You think you're a hero. You just cost yourself your job, your future, everything. I will bury you. I will sue you for slander, for tortious interference, until you are begging on the street. Who are you going to tell? Who is possibly going to believe a waitress over me?" Olivia's heart was pounding, but she stood her ground. "I'm going to tell anyone who will listen." "Good luck with that," he sneered. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and in seconds the restaurant manager, a severe man named Mr. Dubois, burst into the room. "Everything all right, Mr. Rochester?" Dubois asked, his eyes darting nervously between the furious billionaire and the stoic waitress. "No, everything is not all right," Rochester spat. "This employee has harassed my guest and destroyed a private business meeting. I want her fired. Now. And I want her escorted from the premises. I expect you to handle this, or I will make sure the Gilded Compass is blacklisted by every corporation in this city." Mr. Dubois didn't hesitate. He looked at Olivia, his face a mixture of anger and regret. "Sterling, you're fired. Get your things. Security will walk you out." There was no appeal, no hearing. Within 10 minutes, Olivia was standing on the cold pavement of 59th Street, the contents of her locker in a plastic bag, the warmth and light of the Gilded Compass a world away. The city lights blurred through the tears welling in her eyes. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a chilling fear. Rochester wasn't just a rich man. He was a system. He had the power to make his threats a reality. She took a shaky breath, the cold night air stinging her lungs. He was right. Who would believe her? It was her word against his. She had no proof. The contract was gone. The interpreter would be silenced or bought. Mr. Tanaka was likely already on a plane back to Japan, eager to put this nightmare behind him. She started the long walk to the subway, her mind racing. She had acted on pure instinct, on a moral impulse she thought she had long since buried. Now the consequences were crashing down on her. She felt a wave of despair. Maybe she should just disappear. Change her name, move to a different city, and go back to being invisible. As she descended the subway steps at Columbus Circle, her phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice hoarse. "Miss Sterling." The voice was male, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "This is Akio Mr. Tanaka's personal assistant. Please do not hang up." Olivia stopped in her tracks, commuters bumping past her. "I'm here." "Mr. Tanaka is deeply grateful. He is also deeply concerned for your safety. He understands the kind of man Mr. Rochester is. He asked me to tell you that he had his team take a high-resolution photograph of the signature page and Section 7 before he left the room. He says the metadata is intact." A spark ignited in the cold pit of Olivia's stomach. Proof. "He also wishes to offer you a position protection. Anything you need," Akio continued. Olivia's mind, the sharp, analytical mind she hadn't used in years, started working again. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. "Please tell Mr. Tanaka that I am honored, but I can't accept. If I take his money, Rochester will paint me as a corporate saboteur he hired. I can't be on his payroll. But that photograph, can you send it to a secure email address?" There was a pause. "Yes, of course. Mr. Tanaka anticipated you might say that. He said you have the spirit of a samurai." "Tell him I have the debts of a New Yorker," Olivia replied, a flicker of her old dry wit returning. "I'll need more than a photo to fight a man like Rochester. I need to find someone who knows how to fight him on his own turf." She ended the call, a new resolve hardening within her. Rochester had called her a nobody. He had threatened to bury her. But he had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated her. And he had forgotten that sometimes the people with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous opponents of all. Her target was no longer just survival. It was justice. And she knew exactly who her first call had to be. A journalist who had almost gotten buried by Rochester himself a year ago. Ben Carter worked out of a cluttered, coffee-stained office at the New York Sentinel, a once great newspaper now struggling to stay relevant in the digital age. He was a dying breed, an old-school investigative reporter who preferred shoe leather and confidential sources to clickbait headlines. A year ago, Ben had published a series of articles questioning the miraculous efficiency numbers and opaque finances of Helios Future Energies. He'd suggested that their growth was too good to be true, their technology's output mathematically improbable. The backlash had been swift and brutal. Rochester had unleashed his army of lawyers and PR sharks. Ben was accused of being a shill for big oil, of being incompetent, of journalistic malpractice. His sources dried up. His editors got a cold feet, and the story died on the vine, leaving a permanent black mark on Ben's career. He'd been chasing small-time City Hall corruption ever since. When his desk phone rang, he answered with his usual gruff, "Carter." "Mr. Carter, my name is Olivia Sterling. You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about Damien Rochester." Ben sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Listen, lady. If you're another disgruntled ex-employee with a story about him being a tough boss, I'm not interested. I've been down the Rochester rabbit hole. It's a dead end. Were you interested in the fact that he tried to fraudulently acquire a $500 million Japanese company last night using a forged contract?" Olivia's voice was calm, precise. That got his attention. He sat up straighter. "What are you talking about?" "I was the waitress who served them dinner. I stopped the deal from happening." Ben leaned back in his chair, skepticism flooding back in. A waitress. It sounded like a crank call. Right. And how exactly did a waitress uncover a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme between courses? Because I speak fluent Japanese and Damien Rochester doesn't, and I have a photo of the clause in the contract that proves it. There was a long silence on the line. Ben had received countless tips in his career. 99% of them were duds. But there was something in this woman's voice, a complete lack of hysteria, a confidence that was unnerving. Meet me in 1 hour, Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. Come alone. Don't bring a phone if you can help it. If I see anyone who looks like they're with you, I'm gone, he said, and hung up. An hour later, Olivia was sitting on the edge of the fountain, the cool autumn air biting at her cheeks. She spotted him immediately. He looked exactly like his byline photo rumpled trench coat, world-weary expression eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He sat on a bench 20 feet away, observing her, scanning the crowd. After a few minutes, he seemed satisfied and walked over, sitting at the other end of her bench. "All right, Miss Sterling. You have my attention. Talk." Olivia recounted the events of the previous night, leaving out no detail: Rochester's botched Japanese, the interpreter's panic, the exact wording of Section 7, subsection C, the threat her firing. Then she took out a burner phone she'd bought that morning with cash. She pulled up the image Mr. Tanaka's assistant had sent to a newly created encrypted email address and handed it to Ben. He squinted at the screen. The photo was crystal clear. It showed a page of dense legalese. He zoomed in on the section Olivia had indicated. Section 7, C, upon receipt of the initial capital tranche and for the purposes of streamlined operational integration, Tanaka Heavy Industries agrees to a temporary transfer of its controlling shares, 51%, to the designated Helios subsidiary, HFE Global Holdings Limited, for the duration of the technology rollout phase, defined as no less than 60 calendar months. Ben whistled softly. My God, temporary transfer to a Cayman Island subsidiary. There's nothing temporary about that. That's not a partnership. It's a corporate swallowing. He wasn't buying their manufacturing rights. He was buying the entire company with their own money. He looked up at Olivia, seeing her for the first time not as a potential crank, but as a source. A very credible, very brave, and very endangered source. "This is dynamite," he said, his journalistic instincts roaring back to life. "But it's not enough." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, her hope faltering. "It's proof." "It's proof. He's a shark. Yes, but his lawyers will call it an aggressive but standard M&A tactic. They'll claim Tanaka's team missed it in due diligence. They'll say it was a misunderstanding. To nail a guy like Rochester, you can't just show that he's greedy. You have to prove criminal intent. You have to prove the entire enterprise, Helios itself, is a fraud." Ben leaned forward, his voice dropping. "When I was investigating him, I hit a brick wall. His company is a black box. The financials are perfect, too perfect. The energy output from their supposed solar farms in South America and Southeast Asia is flawless, with no downtime, no weather disruptions. It's impossible. I've always suspected the technology is a sham, and the company is just a vehicle for something else. Maybe a massive Ponzi scheme or a money laundering operation. But I could never prove it. The offshore subsidiaries, the shell corporations, the money trail vanishes." Olivia listened intently, her mind processing the information. The scam was bigger than one contract. It was the whole company. "So what do we need?" she asked. Ben looked at her, a glimmer of the old fire in his eyes. "We need an inside source. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried, and we need to trace the money." Find out where that $500 million from Tanaka was really supposed to go. He didn't want it for R&D. He wanted it for something else. He stood up, pacing in front of the bench. This is incredibly dangerous, Olivia. Rochester tried to ruin my career. If he finds out you're talking to me, he will do far worse to you. He already threatened to bury me, Olivia said, her voice steady. I figure the only way out is to make sure he's the one holding the shovel. Ben stopped pacing and looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the first time she had seen him look anything other than weary. All right, Olivia Sterling, he said, extending a hand. Let's go dig a grave. Their alliance was forged right there by the iconic fountain, two people from different worlds united against a common enemy. The waitress who saw too much and the reporter who knew too much. The game was on. Their investigation began in a place of deep paranoia. They communicated only through encrypted apps and burner phones, meeting in anonymous coffee shops in Queens or crowded subway cars during rush hour. Ben's apartment had been mysteriously burgled after his first series of articles on Rochester. He assumed he was still being watched. Olivia, meanwhile, felt the weight of Rochester's gaze everywhere. Every black town car that idled near her building, every person who looked at her for a second too long, sent a spike of fear through her. She was fired from a temp job after 2 days, for unspecified reasons, a clear message that Rochester's reach was long. Ben started by reactivating his old dormant sources in the financial world. He called in favors speaking in hypotheticals, asking about shell corporations and energy sector accounting practices. The name Helios Future Energies was met with a wall of silence. The company was a fortress, its reputation so pristine and its legal team so famously aggressive that no one wanted to risk talking about it. This was where Olivia became their secret weapon. She wasn't a journalist or a financier. She was a linguist and a researcher with a brilliant analytical mind. While Ben hit the streets, Olivia holed up in the 24-hour reading room of the New York Public Library, using their public computers to dive into the digital labyrinth of Rochester's empire. He's hiding in plain sight, she told Ben, during a clandestine meeting in a noisy laundromat. She pushed a stack of papers across a folding table. Look, Helios files hundreds of patents a year. It's part of their image as innovators. But the patents are junk. They're slight variations on existing public domain technology, worded in dense, impenetrable jargon. It's a smokescreen to make them look legitimate. Her next discovery was even more critical. And the solar farms, you were right, Ben. They don't exist. Not really. She had spent days cross-referencing Helios's official press releases and investor reports with satellite imagery databases. The sprawling Helios Solaria complex in the Atacama Desert in Chile, supposedly powering half of Santiago. The satellite photos showed a small, dilapidated array of panels from the 1990s and a single prefabricated administrative building. The Oceanus Floating Solar Project in the Philippines, touted as a marvel of modern engineering. It was a string of weathered buoys and a few dozen panels bobbing in a bay, most of them covered in bird droppings and clearly not operational. It's a global Potemkin village, Ben breathed, looking at the images. He's built just enough to have something to show investors on carefully managed tours, but the energy output numbers he's reporting, he must be faking them. He's not just faking them, Olivia said, pointing to another document. He's using them to launder money. Look at these power purchase agreements with local governments. They're all signed with newly formed, obscure utility companies. I ran their corporate registrations. They all trace back to the same address in Panama. An address that's also linked to HFE Global Holdings, the same subsidiary from Mr. Tanaka's contract. The picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. Helios wasn't an energy company. It was a massive international fraud. Rochester would secure huge investments like the one from Tanaka, claiming it was for building new projects. He would then funnel that money through his network of shell companies, ostensibly as payments for construction and grid hookups for his fake solar farms. In reality, the money was being laundered and redirected back to him, while he reported phantom profits from selling non-existent energy. It was a ghost in the machine, a corporation running on nothing but lies. "This is bigger than I ever imagined," Ben admitted. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, securities fraud on a global scale. This isn't just a story. It's a federal case." But they were still missing the final crucial piece, the internal ledger. The real one. The document that would show the flow of money from investors like Tanaka into the Panamanian shell companies and ultimately into Rochester's pockets. Everything they had was damning circumstantial evidence, but Rochester's lawyers could still argue it away as mismanagement or logistical failures. They needed the smoking gun. Their work wasn't going unnoticed. One evening, as Olivia was returning to her apartment, a man in a dark suit stepped out of the shadows of her hallway. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice calm and menacing. "Mr. Rochester is a forgiving man. He's willing to forget this unfortunate misunderstanding. He's even willing to offer you a generous severance package for your troubles. A confidentiality agreement would be required, of course." Olivia's blood ran cold. "I'm not interested." "You should be," the man said, taking a step closer. "Life can be very difficult in this city when you have powerful enemies. Accidents happen. Reputations can be ruined. Think about your future." He smiled, a chillingly empty gesture, and then melted back into the shadows. The threat was no longer veiled. It was raw and real. That night, Olivia didn't sleep. She sat in her small apartment, the city lights feeling less like a promise and more like the eyes of a predator. She and Ben were close, she knew it. But they were running out of time. They had to find a way inside Helios, to find someone who knew the truth and was willing to talk before Rochester decided to silence them for good. The key to toppling an empire is never breaching the main gate. It's finding the one loose stone in the foundation. For Olivia and Ben, that stone was a man named Leo Martinez. Leo was a senior accountant in the labyrinthine finance department of Helios Future Energies. He was in his late 20s, quiet and brilliant with numbers. He had joined Helios right out of college, seduced by the company's green mission and the promise of being part of a team that was changing the world. For 3 years, he had been a model employee, diligently managing the intricate spreadsheets and financial reports that flowed across his desk. But Leo was too smart not to notice the inconsistencies. He saw the astronomical revenues from the Solaria complex that never seemed to match the paltry operational expenditures. He processed massive multi-million-dollar wire transfers to engineering contractors in Panama and Malaysia, whose corporate footprints were almost non-existent. When he raised questions, his direct supervisor would politely but firmly tell him that it was above his pay grade and related to proprietary project financing structures. The cognitive dissonance was eating him alive. He was helping save the planet, yet his daily work felt more like the creative accounting of a gangster. The attempted acquisition of Tanaka Industries was the final straw. He saw the internal memos celebrating the impending deal and knew from the figures he was privy to that the $500 million wasn't earmarked for any legitimate project. It was designated for HFE Global Holdings Special Projects Fund, a notorious black hole from which money never returned. Ben Carter found Leo's name through a disgruntled former Helios HR manager he had interviewed a year prior. "If anyone in that place has a conscience, it's Leo Martinez," the source had said. "He asks too many questions." Getting to Leo was like planning a prison break. He was terrified. His wife had just had their first child, and he had a mortgage. He ignored Ben's encrypted emails and blocked his calls. He knew what happened to people who crossed Damien Rochester. Olivia devised a different approach. Using her research skills, she discovered that Leo's wife was a passionate advocate for a small community garden in their neighborhood in Astoria, Queens. On a crisp Saturday morning, Olivia was there, posing as a new volunteer, her hands in the dirt planting kale next to Leo's wife, Maria. They bonded over the challenges of urban gardening and the joys of new motherhood. Olivia never mentioned Helios. She just became a friendly, familiar face. After 2 weeks, the opportunity came. Leo arrived to pick up his wife, looking exhausted and stressed. Olivia accidentally bumped into him. "You must be Leo," she said with a warm smile. "Maria talks about you all the time." Leo looked at her, his guard down for just a moment in this place of peace and community. "I'm Olivia," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "I'm a friend of Ben Carter's. We need your help, Leo. We know what Rochester is doing." Fear washed over Leo's face. He grabbed his wife's arm, ready to flee. "Wait," Olivia said, her voice urgent but gentle. "He won't stop with Tanaka. He's building a house of cards, and when it falls, everyone is going to be buried underneath it, including you. They will say you were complicit. The "I was just following orders" defense doesn't work so well for accountants in fraud cases. She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have a new baby. Do you want him to grow up visiting his father in a federal prison?" That hit home. Over the next week, they communicated through Maria, who acted as a go-between. Finally, Leo agreed to a meeting. They met late at night in the deserted upper level of the Staten Island ferry terminal. The wind howled outside, and the vast, dark windows reflected their tense faces. "I can't be a witness," Leo whispered, his hands shaking. "They'll destroy my family." "We don't need you to testify," Ben said, his tone reassuring. "We need what you have access to, the real books, the unsanitized ledgers that show the money transfers to the shell corporations." "It's all on a separate server," Leo explained. "Rochester calls it the shadow ledger. It's air-gapped, not connected to the internet. Access is restricted to 3 senior executives and requires a physical security key." Their hopes plummeted. It was impossible. "But," Leo continued, taking a deep breath, "every quarter for the internal audit, a snapshot of the ledger is loaded onto a firewalled terminal in the archives room for reconciliation. They wipe it after 24 hours. The next reconciliation is in 2 days." A plan began to form, desperate and fraught with risk. Leo would be the man on the inside. He would have to use a supervisor's login, one he had seen typed in hundreds of times, to access the terminal during a window of opportunity. He would then have to copy the massive data file onto a specific type of encrypted USB drive that could bypass the terminal's security protocols, a device Ben could procure from a source in the world of corporate espionage. "The window is maybe 5 minutes," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "The archives are covered by cameras. If I get caught—" "You won't," Olivia said with a confidence she didn't feel. "Create a diversion. Spill a coffee on the server rack in the main accounting floor. It'll trigger a minor alert, and IT will have to shut down the network for a few minutes for a diagnostic. Everyone will be distracted. That's your window." The night of the planned data heist was agonizing. Olivia and Ben sat in a parked car, a block from the Helios Tower, watching the illuminated floors, feeling utterly powerless. They had one burner phone, waiting for a one-word text from Leo. Hours crawled by. Just after 11 p.m., when the cleaning crews were busy on other floors, the phone buzzed. The message read, "Done." 20 minutes later, Leo Martinez walked out of the building, a nondescript man in a sea of late-working drones. He didn't look at them. As he passed a trash can on the corner, he dropped a rolled-up newspaper into it and kept walking, never breaking his stride, disappearing into the subway entrance. Ben waited a full minute, then got out of the car, calmly walked to the trash can, and retrieved the newspaper. Tucked inside was a tiny USB drive, no bigger than a fingernail. It felt as heavy as a gold bar in his hand. They had it. They had the ghost in the machine. They had Damien Rochester's entire criminal enterprise on a stick. The data on the USB drive was more damning than they could have ever imagined. It was the shadow ledger in its entirety, a meticulous record of a $500 million criminal enterprise. It detailed every dollar from investors being funneled into the Panamanian shell companies, then rerouted through a dizzying network of accounts in Cyprus, Singapore, and the British Virgin Islands. Finally, the money landed in private accounts and investment portfolios held by one man, Damien Rochester. The files even included fabricated engineering reports and forged power generation statements used to deceive auditors and investors. He didn't just cook the books, Ben muttered, scrolling through file after file in his secure apartment, the blinds drawn. He built a whole new kitchen and wrote a new cuisine. They now had the proof to send Rochester to prison for life. But Ben knew that a data dump, even one this explosive, could get tied up in court for years. Rochester's lawyers would claim the data was fabricated, hacked, or taken out of context. They needed something more. They needed to catch Rochester red-handed. They needed a confession. "We need to put him back in a room with Mr. Tanaka," Olivia said, the idea forming in her mind. "Rochester is arrogant. His biggest weakness is his belief that everyone is either a fool or can be bought. He won't be able to resist the chance to get that money back." It was a bold and dangerous idea. They reached out to Mr. Tanaka through his assistant Akio. The elderly chairman, who had been quietly conducting his own investigation and was horrified by what he was discovering about Helios, agreed immediately. He was not just a victim. He was a man whose honor demanded that justice be served. The plan was audacious. Mr. Tanaka would send an official communication to Rochester, drafted by Olivia, to mimic the formal, slightly contrite tone of Japanese business correspondence. The letter would state that after much consideration, Mr. Tanaka believed there had been a grave cultural misunderstanding, blaming his own team for their overly cautious interpretation of the contract. He would propose a new meeting in New York to finalize the deal, suggesting only a few minor face-saving amendments to the original agreement. The $500 million bait was back on the table. Rochester, blinded by greed and ego, took it. He believed his threats had worked, that Olivia had been silenced, and that Tanaka, seeing no other option, had come crawling back. He agreed to the meeting. The location was key. It couldn't be a corporate office. It had to be neutral territory, a place where Rochester would feel in control. They chose the scene of the original crime, the Gilded Compass. This time, however, things would be different. Ben Carter had taken the complete data file to a contact he trusted implicitly. An assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York named Sarah Jenkins. Jenkins, a tenacious prosecutor who specialized in complex financial crimes, saw the case of a lifetime. The Department of Justice moved quickly and quietly. The Polaris suite at the Gilded Compass was swept for bugs and then rebugged with the FBI's own state-of-the-art audio and video recording equipment. The waiters who would serve the meal were not restaurant staff. They were undercover federal agents. The restaurant manager, Mr. Dubois, had been paid a visit by two serious-looking men from the FBI, and was now cooperating, fully terrified of being charged as an accessory. Olivia's role was the most dangerous. She would be there. Rochester needed to see her to witness her complete and utter defeat. It was part of the trap designed to feed his ego and make him feel invincible. She would be brought to the table by Mr. Dubois, ostensibly, to offer a formal, groveling apology to both Rochester and Mr. Tanaka for her hysterical outburst. On the day of the meeting, Olivia felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. She was wearing her old Waitress uniform, a costume for the final act of this drama. In a small receiver in her ear, she could hear Sarah Jenkins's calm voice from a surveillance van parked across the street. "We have you, Olivia. We are with you every step of the way. Just play your part." Damien Rochester arrived looking triumphant. He saw Mr. Tanaka seated at the table and gave a magnanimous smile. "Kenji, I am so glad we could move past that unfortunate incident. Water under the bridge." As planned, Mr. Dubois entered with Olivia trailing behind him, her head bowed. "Mr. Rochester, Mr. Tanaka," the manager said, his voice trembling slightly. "Ms. Sterling wishes to offer her sincerest apologies for her unprofessional behavior." Rochester leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked Olivia up and down, enjoying her humiliation. "Well, let's hear it." Olivia took a deep breath. "Mr. Rochester," she began, her voice quiet and submissive, "I am deeply sorry. I overstepped my bounds. I misunderstood what I heard, and I created a terrible situation. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." It was the most difficult sentence she had ever spoken. Rochester chuckled. "Of course I forgive you. How could I not? It takes a big person to admit when they are wrong." He then turned to Mr. Tanaka, his voice shifting to one of conspiratorial confidence. "You see, Kenji, these things happen. Passionate but simple people. They don't understand the complexities of our world. Now about that pesky Section 7. Mr. Tanaka interrupted him. "There is one thing I must understand first, Rochester-san," he said in Japanese, his voice hard as iron. Olivia provided the English translation, her voice now clear and strong. "To repair trust, I must know why that clause was written that way. Explain its necessity to me." This was the moment. Rochester, brimming with confidence, sure that he had won, leaned forward. This was his fatal mistake. He wanted to gloat. "Kenji, it's a simple protection mechanism," he said, his voice low and smooth, unaware that every word was being recorded. "The world of green energy is unpredictable. By temporarily holding your shares through our subsidiary, we create a unified financial front. It allows me to move capital with agility to grease the wheels where they need greasing, bypassing pesky regulations in places like Chile, paying off local officials in the Philippines. You can't put that in an annual report. Your $500 million isn't for building solar panels, my friend. It's the key that unlocks a much, much larger treasure chest. It's the cost of doing business at our level." He smiled, a predator showing his teeth. "Don't worry. Your company is safe. And once the money is cleaned through the system, the profits will be extraordinary." He had confessed to it all: bribery, money laundering, and the core of the fraud. Olivia looked up, meeting Rochester's eyes, and allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Thank you, Mr. Rochester," she said in perfect English. "That's exactly what we needed to hear." Rochester's face contorted in confusion. Before he could process what was happening, the service door burst open. It wasn't waiters who came through. It was 6 FBI agents in tactical vests. Damien Rochester. Agent Harris, the lead investigator, announced, his voice booming in the silent room. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities, fraud, and money laundering. The blood drained from Rochester's face as the reality of the situation crashed down upon him. His eyes darted around the room at Mr. Tanaka's stony face, at the FBI agents, and finally at Olivia. The waitress. The nobody. The ghost who had brought down an empire. The look in his eyes was not of anger, but of pure, unadulterated shock. He had been so sure of his power, he never even saw the trap close around him. The downfall of Damien Rochester was a seismic event. The story Ben Carter published in the New York Sentinel was the most read article in the paper's history, syndicated globally within hours. The stock of Helios Future Energies plummeted to zero before exchanges halted trading, wiping out billions of dollars in speculative market value overnight. The unsealing of the federal indictment revealed a sprawling criminal conspiracy that shocked even the most jaded Wall Street veterans. The shadow ledger, which prosecutors dubbed the Rochester Rosetta Stone, became the roadmap for a massive international investigation. Dozens of Helios executives, complicit auditors, and corrupt foreign officials were arrested. The fallout was a stark reminder that even the most celebrated visionaries could be hollow shells built on nothing more than charisma and crime. Damien Rochester denied bail as a flight risk, traded his Tom Ford suits for an orange jumpsuit, his case becoming a symbol of ultimate corporate hubris. In the whirlwind that followed, Olivia Sterling was thrust into the spotlight she had never sought. No longer an invisible waitress, she was the billion-dollar waitress, a media sensation. At first, she was terrified by the attention, but with Ben and a pro bono lawyer recommended by Mr. Tanaka guiding her, she navigated the storm. She gave one single exclusive interview to Ben Carter, ensuring the true story was told in his words, not the sensationalized headlines of the tabloids. In it, she spoke not of heroism, but of the simple, profound importance of speaking up when something is wrong. Her old life was gone forever. The Gilded Compass offered her job back with a promotion, but she politely declined. The world of serving the powerful had lost its appeal. Instead, she found her life taking a direction she never could have predicted. Mr. Tanaka, eternally grateful, made her an extraordinary offer. He wasn't offering a handout, but an opportunity. Tanaka Heavy Industries was creating a new international compliance and ethics division, designed to vet all foreign partnerships to prevent anything like the Helios deception from ever happening again. He wanted Olivia to help build it. She accepted. Her fluency in Japanese, her sharp analytical mind, and her unshakable moral compass made her uniquely qualified. She spent the next year traveling between New York and Osaka, her past and her future merging. She was no longer running from the ambitious woman she had once been. She was embracing her, but on her own terms. She wasn't just a cog in the machine of global commerce. She was its conscience. Ben Carter won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on the Helios scandal, revitalizing his career and the fortunes of the New York Sentinel. He and Olivia remained close friends, bonded by the shared danger and triumph of their investigation. Leo Martinez, who was granted full immunity for his cooperation, quietly resigned from his job and moved his family to Colorado, using a generous, anonymous gift that appeared in his bank account from a certain Japanese industrialist to open his own small accounting firm, specializing in forensic audits, for non-profits. Olivia Sterling never became a billionaire. She never graced the cover of a magazine. But she found something far more valuable purpose. Her life was no longer defined by the tragedy that had derailed it, but by the single moment of courage that had put it back on a better, more meaningful track. Sometimes she would walk past the towering skyscraper that housed the Gilded Compass. She would look up at the 65th floor, a place of power and illusion, and remember the woman she had been invisible, burdened, and silent. She had found her voice in that room, and in doing so, she hadn't just exposed a lie. She had discovered her own truth. Her actions had proven that it doesn't matter how high the tower is or how powerful the people inside are. A single voice speaking the truth can bring it all crashing down. The story of Olivia Sterling is a powerful testament to the idea that courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. It's a reminder that integrity can be found in the most unexpected places, and that one person armed with the truth can indeed change the world. She wasn't a CEO, a politician, or a power broker. She was a waitress who chose to do the right thing, and in doing so, she brought a corrupt $500 million empire to its knees. Her story proves that your position in life doesn't define your impact. If this incredible story of bravery and justice moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of the power of a single voice. And most importantly, if you want to hear more unforgettable true stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.